Sources tell NBC News Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's behavior has become erratic, and he's focusing more on public appearances in an effort to show the president that he is a fighter. Officials say there is a tense environment in the Pentagon, with disputes and even yelling among Hegseth's senior staff. This comes amid a slew of controversies. The White House has dismissed all of this. Two U.S. officials say President Trump spoke to Hegseth over the phone after the New York Times revealed the secretary disclosed military plans in two different Signal group chats, one of which included his wife and his brother. The sources say the president made clear to Hegseth he did not approve, calling his use of Signal, quote, childish. One official says the phone call ended with Trump telling Hegseth to keep fighting. According to the Wall Street Journal, when news broke about Elon Musk possibly attending a classified briefing on China, Hegseth reportedly accused several people of the leak, including his then acting chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Two sources tell the Journal Hegseth shouted at Admiral Christopher Grady, threatening to, quote, hook him up to a polygraph, marking what the Journal calls a turning point in an already rocky tenure. Let's bring in one of the reporters on that Wall Street Journal piece, national security correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, Nancy Youssef. Nancy, good morning. Great to have you back with us. So a lot of rich detail in your piece this morning for the Journal. I guess the question is, how long can this go on? Pete Hegseth clearly scrambling, trying to save his reputation, save his image, save his job, sending signals to the president with notable media appearances, including a long interview a couple of days ago on Fox News. How long is he for this job?
Well, he so far continues to have the support of the president, who has said that he's backed him. He's called these charges a waste of time to discuss, and that he still has the president's backing, because I think the president sees someone who is really focused on how the president receives him. He's focused on the war fighter, getting rid of DEI, some of the things that the president's interested in. But there are other constituencies, including the Hill. We will find out more next week in terms of where he stands on Capitol Hill, because legislators were out this week. It'll be particularly interesting what Senator Wicker, the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, has to say, as he was key to Hegseth's confirmation. And then within the building itself is a constituency in that there's a real climate of dysfunction, frankly, as people are trying to navigate a building in which they're seeing a frequent turnover among their leadership, fear about what they can and can't do, and an uncertainty about how to conduct themselves in such a way that doesn't cross wires with the secretary.
And it sounds like the planned briefing, as I mentioned, of Elon Musk, on China, really infuriated the president and was maybe a turning point here.
That's right, because I think one of the most important people that Hegseth is looking at is the president, and that was the first time he had really sort of drawn the ire of the White House. And so, in pursuit of figuring out who was behind that leak, he made a lot of accusations in the building, went up to senior military officers, including the then acting chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Remember that the chairman, C.Q. Brown, had been fired a few weeks earlier, and threatened to polygraph them. To be clear, he did not polygraph them, but you can imagine the kind of climate that creates when we're threatening senior military officers with polygraph. That shows a sort of level of distrust. And from there, we started to see a secretary that became more and more concerned about who was revealing information. He already had a small coterie of staffers around him, because he'd gotten rid of so many longtime Pentagon employees when he arrived to the Pentagon. And so now we're in a building where the staffing is quite small, and because of it, you're seeing a secretary who appears to almost be isolated from the rest of the building. And I think we're at a point now where we'll start to see a rebuild of that staff. What it looks like and whether he can sort of reset the relationship within the building is yet to be seen. But that March 21st meeting with Elon Musk and the reports that was happening really sort of started to unravel the relationship between the secretary and the higher ranking military officers, and even some of his own staff who he brought in to the building.
Nancy, it's Richard Haass here. Amidst all this turbulence and all this theater, or whatever you want to call it, the purging of the generals and admirals, the unraveling of the staff, what's actually going on in terms of policy? This guy's been in the job for nearly 100 days. What has he done? What has he done about pivoting to Asia? What has he done about U.S. forces, about the budget, about new technologies? What, if any, impact has he had substantively on U.S. defense policy and national security?
I'm so glad you asked the question, because that is the ultimate impact of all of this, is on national security. When we're talking about whether there's a makeup room or who's been fired this week, we're not talking about key national security issues. I would note that the U.S. has been doing strikes in Yemen every day since March 15th. The Yemenis have said that that the U.S. has damaged hospitals, killed civilians. We have yet to get any detailed breakdown in terms of how many strikes have been conducted, what has been hit, at what cost, and where the U.S. is in the mission. And so the ultimate impact is that we're not talking about what's happening in Yemen, what U.S. support in Ukraine could look like, military budgets, what the pivot towards threats from Asia could look like, because everything is so focused on sort of the dynamics within the building.
Nancy, I think that Washington assumes Haig says it's not going to serve 4 years as Secretary of Defense, and maybe not 4 more weeks, that in the short term he's going to be replaced. If so, if that happens either next week or in 6 months, who are the names that would Trump like to place with? Who could also get through Senate confirmation, which was no easy task the last time around?
It's sort of the parlor talk within the building. How long does he last and who comes in next? You're absolutely right. And we're starting to hear rumored names. I wouldn't say anything confirmed. I think among the names we've heard are, to your point, people like Secretary of Army Dan Driscoll, because he's already been confirmed. We've heard names like Bridge Colby, who was just confirmed as Undersecretary for Defense Policy. So those are sort of internal names. But we've also heard talk about looking at industry and other parts of the sort of national security apparatus to find names. I think what will be interesting, too, is this someone who is more loyal to sort of the MAGA message as Hegseth has been, or more sort of hawkish in terms of defense policy? Will they make a shift there too, or is the president really looking at someone who's above all loyal to the MAGA message?
National security correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, Nancy Youssef. Her new piece you can read this morning at the Journal's website. Nancy, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Still ahead on